Stanley Kubrick, arguably cinema's greatest director and a master of literary adaptation, wrote in 1961 that the perfect novel from which to make a movie is, I think, not the novel of action, but on the contrary, the novel which is mainly concerned with the inner life of its characters. It's a fascinating observation, one that seems paradoxical. Wouldn't a novel centered on plot provide a better foundation for a film, a visual medium, rather than one focused on interior thought and motivation, things which are inherently unfilmable? According to Kubrick, a novel rooted in the inner life of its characters provides what he called a compass bearing, and it is a filmmaker's job to then create action that correlates to the book's psychological intent. Whether or not novelist and screenwriter William Goldman was familiar with Kubrick's thesis, he approached the screen adaptation of Stephen King's novel Misery in this exact fashion, which director Rob Reiner then brought to cinematic life in 1990. The film is better than the book, a rare thing, and it surpasses its source material by taking ideas and letting the audience, as Kubrick notes, discover them, and it is the thrill of the discovery that makes them more powerful. We're shown, not told. The novel itself never leaves Annie Wilkes' house, and we as readers are never outside of writer Paul Sheldon's head. Everything is concerned with his inner life. Goldman takes Sheldon and his interiority and the basic plot outline, Sheldon is a writer saved from a car accident by his professed #1 fan, and then held captive by her, and runs with it. The feeling among people who have read the novel and seen the movie is that the adaptation is faithful to the book, while acknowledging that required compression to accommodate a film's runtime. The feeling is a result of the fidelity to the novel's compass, not its story. King creates a character in Sheldon who is a kind of injured animal in a trap, one all too conscious of his predicament and of the danger presented by his captor, a mentally ill woman who seemingly has no intention of ever letting him leave her remote Colorado home. The novel has elements that allow it to work as a psychological horror story on the page, but many of these things are problematic for a screen thriller. How do Goldman and Reiner solve this? Let's break it down. King keeps the novel entirely inside Annie's house, the vast majority inside a spare bedroom, and even the car accident that leads him to her home is a memory. The first words are just a collection of sounds that are not quite words, and we decipher later that it is Annie saying she is Paul's #1 fan, which he faintly hears through a semi-conscious fog. The claustrophobic setting is the perfect metaphor for Paul being trapped, and it would work on this stage. Goldman and others have indeed adapted the story for the theater, but the world needs expanding for a film. Goldman invents a new opening scene. He creates an action that correlates to the character's psychological makeup. Paul's in a hotel room, having just finished his new novel, and he engages in silent ritual, pouring a glass of Dom Perignon champagne and smoking a single Lucky Strike cigarette to mark it. It is ritual and not celebration, which we can discern from his body language and facial expression. He puts the manuscript inside a leather briefcase. We don't know exactly what it means yet, but we're intrigued. We also don't know that Goldman has provided crucial foreshadowing for the climax. In little more than a minute, Goldman provides us with the main character, his profession, and the fact that he is somehow unsatisfied, all without a spoken word. We are discovering through action. Goldman then shows us the car accident. Before Paul is rescued, we get a flashback, and we learn why he is in a kind of professional malaise. Paul, portrayed by James Caan, is holding the leather briefcase in the office of his agent, portrayed by Lauren Bacall. It is another invented scene. Paul is lamenting what he has become.
I never meant for it to become my life. And if I hadn't gotten rid of it now, I'd have ended up writing it forever.
Now I'm leaving for Colorado to try to finish the new book.
If I can make this work, I might just have something I want on my tombstone.
Not only does it provide characterization, but we get another piece of crucial information. He is known for a series of books and a character he does not like, so much so that he has killed the character in the last novel, which is about to be published. This is vital information because Annie is his #1 fan through the Misery series. When she tells him this, with Paul hearing it through a semi-conscious fog, we already have the necessary backstory to know exactly what it means. He was coherent enough to ask a couple of questions, and the foundation and the characters are established in 6.5 minutes.
Where?
We're just outside Silver Creek.
How long?
You've been here 2 days. You're gonna be okay. My name is Annie Wilkes.
I'm #1 fan.
That's right. I'm also a nurse.
But having gone outside the world of Annie's home, we need to stay tethered to it somehow, and it happens through more invention by Goldman, who creates the characters of the local sheriff, Buster, and his wife, Virginia. People are surely looking for Paul Sheldon in the world of King's novel, but we don't know it until an anonymous state trooper arrives on Annie's property, 235 pages into a 310-page hardcover. In the film, Goldman has Paul's agent calling Buster at the 10-minute mark. This serves two important purposes. One, it provides the suspense that works to make this a thriller and not a horror story. Can Buster find Paul in time to save his life? In the novel, King repeatedly uses the thought experiment of "can you" to represent a problem and a solution. Paul was always able to take a problem in a story and provide a way out of it. In the film, Paul and Buster work independently and unknowingly together to solve the "can you" problems of his captivity. The banter between Buster and Virginia is the second purpose, which takes us out of the claustrophobic home and gives us some needed comic relief between moments of tension, which Goldman and Reiner brilliantly dial up and down.
When you're in this car, you're not my wife, you're my deputy.
This also gives us 3 additional characters, because for the first 75% of King's book, it is just Paul and Annie. This works in the novel because it is a psychological horror story, and Annie is much crazier than she is in the film. For a suspense thriller, the power dynamic needs to be leveled somewhat, and Kathy Bates' Annie, while undeniably disturbed, is nowhere near as crazy as King's creation, a psychopath clearly suffering from borderline personality disorder. A sympathetic character makes us feel sorry for them, even if we do not like them. The Annie Wilkes of the novel is not sympathetic. She is a sadistic serial killer with a violent temper who is so unhinged that we view her as an inhuman monster. She alienates us very early. In the first 25 pages, Annie, as in the film, gets angry as she talks about reading Paul's unpublished book and spills soup on his bed. Here, she also hurls the bowl across the room, where it splashes the floor and walls. When she cleans it up later, after her anger should have long since subsided, she makes him take his pain medication by drinking dirty water from the mop bucket. And that's just the beginning. She does not hobble him by breaking his ankles with a sledgehammer after she knows he has wandered out of the bedroom. She cuts off a foot with an axe and then cauterizes the stump with a blowtorch. When Paul benignly complains later about having to use a typewriter with a missing key to write the book that she demands, so that Paul can bring Misery the character back to life, she decides in the moment to cut off his thumb with an electric carving knife. She leaves for long stretches to go to a cabin she calls her laughing place, where she says she mostly just screams. In one particularly long stretch away, at least one of the cows on her property dies from neglect. King repeatedly takes it to extreme horror. In one grotesque scene, Annie has a rat still alive in a trap at Paul's bedside. She squeezes it to death in her hand, and then absently sucks the blood from her fingers as she continues talking to him. As for the state trooper who shows up 3/4 of the way through the book, Annie stabs him and then runs him over with a riding lawnmower. This is the realm of surreal nightmare, down to a Michael Myers-like disappearance by Annie after Paul thinks he has killed her at the climax. Goldman consciously veers from this, using the compass to stay true to psychological intention and character while making Annie sympathetic. We're not sure for some time just how far she will go to keep Paul captive to write a novel that brings her beloved Misery back to life. At times, she smiles and laughs and seems normal, even if somewhat strange. Goldman's Annie is psychologically true to King's, but Goldman softens her without betraying the characterization, giving us a sad shut-in with no husband, family, or friends. She has a pet pig she's named Misery. It's a barnyard pig in the book. And her culturally stale Liberace records. We fear her, but we also feel sorry for her. But only until we know that she is a severely disturbed murderer who will eventually kill Paul unless he can somehow escape or Buster rescues him. Again, the discoveries we make as viewers along these lines thrill us, and Goldman expertly takes horror and turns it into suspense, and we do not feel cheated because the compass always points true north. We are able to understand the novel's Annie and the film's Paul only when we understand King's motivation. She represents King's own addictions in the late 1970s and early 1980s to cocaine and alcohol, a metaphor for the substances holding him prisoner and threatening to destroy him. Writing Misery was a sustained self-therapy session, and King told Rolling Stone magazine in 2014 that Misery is a book about cocaine. Annie Wilkes is cocaine. She was my #1 fan. The novel makes perfect sense from this perspective. Sheldon is King's doppelganger, and he is trying to write a book while being tormented by a demon, and it is touch and go as to which entity will emerge victorious in the end. The novel's Paul is addicted to a fictional painkiller called Novril from the very beginning, and it is the 900-pound gorilla on his back as he tries to write a novel to satisfy Annie and buy him enough time to figure a way out. But his mind and body crave the Novril, which is always at the forefront of his thoughts, which drive the book's narrative. Goldman never allows Paul to get hooked. The film's Paul realizes early the power of the pills, and he stops taking them. Instead, he begins to stockpile them. We don't know exactly why until he asks Annie to have dinner with him to celebrate Misery's return when he has successfully started the novel, thrilling her.
Would you have dinner with me tonight to celebrate Misery's return?
Oh, Paul. It would be an honor.
After proposing they toast to Misery, Paul says they should do it right.
Let's do this right. Do you have any candles?
Oh, I don't know. I think so. You! I just picked things up over the years.
Well, it certainly says you.
You really think so?
We are on the edge of our seats, waiting for Annie to drink the wine, but she clumsily knocks over the glass, and we share Paul's sense of disbelief and despair. While Goldman's Paul is active and not passive, he is true to King's creation. Writing is at the heart of who he is, and after his attempt to drug Annie fails, he dives completely into the novel he never planned to write, swept up in his ability to craft stories. It defines him. He also commits to building strength, echoing the novel, and we know he will be tested at some point when Annie comes into his room in a severely depressed state, carrying a gun and musing that she might load it. He knows he must escape soon, and upon exploring the house again, he discovers Annie's dark past. Always on the periphery is Goldman's Buster, and the combination of Paul and Buster working toward a resolution in juxtaposition, especially after Paul's wrecked car is discovered, provides the suspense and sense of discovery that make the film a taut thriller instead of a grotesque nightmare. King's novel doesn't have the sense of climactic urgency that Goldman creates in the film. The murder of the state trooper does not bring immediate consequences, and a follow-up visit by two cops provides tension, but no resolution. They leave the house suspicious, but without incident. The book builds to a finale and confrontation when Paul finishes the novel and asks for a single cigarette. He's an active smoker, not a reformed one. Annie reluctantly agrees to give him one cigarette and one match, which sets the stage for his burning of the manuscript. He grabs lighter fluid after being temporarily stowed in the basement, and a physical confrontation between them. She somehow escapes the spare bedroom after the infliction of multiple head injuries, and is later found dead in a barn by troopers who discover Paul, who is half insane by book's end. Goldman's climax is much more satisfying and emotionally resonant. Buster has pieced it all together and comes to the house convinced Annie is holding Paul captive. We have grown to love Buster, and when Annie shoots him from behind with a shotgun, we're devastated. and it demands immediate, not delayed, resolution. Paul convinces Annie to let him finish the novel that night before she can end things for them both, and it is here that Goldman brilliantly echoes his opening scene. Annie, who knows everything about Paul, has already bought a bottle of Dom Perignon, and it and a single Lucky Strike are at the ready. Paul charmingly says they will need 2 glasses this time, which gives him the opportunity to strike the match, light a bundle of paper afire, and threaten to burn the manuscript when she returns. When Annie goes to save the book in her precious misery, Paul brings the heavy manual typewriter down on her. They have a sustained physical confrontation and a false death before Goldman's ultimate irony. Paul takes out Annie with the metal pig version of misery, eliminating her with his creation and her obsession. The denouement is much more satisfying. We get a rational Paul who walks with a limp, having lunch with his agent. In talking about the experience, he says that sometimes he sees her everywhere, but not in the delusional way the novel's Paul does. The fantasy is revealed when the waitress, too, gushes that she is his #1 fan.
That's very sweet of you.
It perfectly caps an adaptation that nails Kubrick's theory about adaptations. Create actions and situations true to the author's psychological intent, and even when you invent something new, it feels like the book has come alive in the most satisfying of ways.